Hello everyone, and welcome to Healthy Food Retail 101, Strategies for Changing the Food Retail Environment. This is the first in NPLAN's 6-part webinar series for 2014. I'm Christine Fry, and I will be the host for today's webinar. And before I introduce myself any further, I'll say a few words about our organization and NPLAN. So ChangeLab Solutions is a public health nonprofit that's based in Oakland, California, and we work nationally on policy to create healthier places to live. NPLAN, or the National Policy and Legal Analysis Network to Prevent Childhood Obesity, is our Robert Wood Johnson Foundation-funded childhood obesity prevention project. We're national technical assistance providers to people in states and communities around the country that want to, again, use law and policy to reduce childhood obesity rates. So this is me and my colleague Rio Holliday. I'm a senior policy analyst here at ChangeLab, and I focus on healthy food retail and other types of food policy. And I'm joined by Rio, who I'll let introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Rio. I am a food system policy analyst here at ChangeLab. I'm coordinating the whole Healthy Food Retail series that we are putting together, and I'll also be facilitating a couple of the upcoming webinars as well.
Great. And I should also add that we have a whole team of people who focus on different aspects of the retail environment, who you'll hear from over the course of the 6 webinars. We have folks who focus on marketing, tobacco, land use, and much more. If you're longtime fans of our webinar series, you know we have to give a quick disclaimer, which basically says that we're not providing legal advice and we are not lobbying. We're just providing nonpartisan information about public health. So, as I said, this is the first in our series of 6 webinars that we'll host throughout the year focused on healthy food retail. The goals of today's very short webinar, this is just a 30-minute webinar, are to give you an orientation to the series and what we mean by healthy food retail. We'll also provide some questions for your team to consider as you embark on planning healthy food retail programs and policies in your community. And we'll also note some key resources that you might want to check out on our website and some technical assistance that's available as you move through this series with us. So first we wanted to define what we plan to focus on during the series so that you know what you're getting into. In general, there are 3 types of interventions to improve the retail environment. The first is instituting policies and programs to make pop-up retail legal and easier to implement. Now, by pop-up retail, we mean farmers markets, mobile vending, and other types of retail that don't occur within what we might consider a traditional bricks and mortar environment. Another category of retail work focuses on existing small stores, so corner stores, convenience stores, bodegas, gas stations. Every place has a different name for these small stores. This work might include corner store conversions, healthy retail programs, policies that incentivize or require healthy food to be stocked, and policies that limit junk food, tobacco, and or alcohol access. I want to note that we are thinking more and more about how tobacco and nutrition programs in particular in health departments can work together to improve the whole retail environment. For the most part, though, this webinar series is going to focus on the food side of things. But feel free to reach out to us offline if you're interested in collaborating across the nutrition and tobacco silos. And finally, many states and communities are looking at developing new grocery stores or supermarkets in places that don't have them to fill a big gap in food access. So as I mentioned, this webinar series will focus primarily on small store work, that second option. However, for our rural webinar in September, we'll also discuss grocery store strategies since many rural communities are struggling to keep just their one grocery store, much less working in multiple stores. We have resources and expertise on the other two strategies, pop-up retail and grocery store or supermarket attraction. So feel free to contact us about those strategies if you're interested. Now, whatever you plan to do in the retail environment should be done within the larger context of your community and the region's food system. We aren't going to talk about your bigger food system plan in this series or today's webinar. It's important, though, to be aware of what else is happening in the community and to look for opportunities to collaborate and connect different parts of the food system. For example, does your school district have a farm-to-school policy or program? Could there be opportunities to work with the same farmers to get local fresh produce into small stores? Is the health department working on healthy vending in government buildings and other community institutions? Is it possible to align the vending, snack, and beverage standards with what you're trying to do in the food retail environment? Coordinated efforts like this can be mutually reinforcing, and you can potentially find partners for going after funding or who can lend a hand on something that they're particularly skilled at or have expertise in. So this slide, it looks like my animation doesn't show up here. So you'll just have to kind of ignore the store right in the middle of it. And let's focus on the left-hand side of the screen, this kind of rainbow-colored path. So focusing on the small store work again, here's how we think about the path to improving the small store environment throughout a community or a neighborhood. So everybody starts out by just thinking about it and learning about potential strategies that they could implement in their community. And once you move past that and you decide that you're going to work on improving access to healthy food in the small store environment, we have noticed that communities tend to start with just working with a handful of stores. They might work intensively with those stores to stock fresh produce and to place healthier products in more visible locations within the store. Maybe even ask them to take down certain unhealthy advertising and put up advertising that promotes healthier products. Eventually, those efforts might expand into a more robust formal program that's open to more stores within a particular neighborhood or even the entire community, depending on the size of your city or town. Most communities in the U.S., from what we've observed, are somewhere in these first three boxes, either just thinking about retail strategies, working with one or two stores, or operating a healthy food retailer program. Some places, though, are starting to look ahead to policies as a way to sustain and expand their efforts. For example, the city of San Francisco has worked in the small store environment through program work for a long time, many years. And they recently adopted a healthy food retail incentive policy that requires the health department and the economic development department to work together to offer incentives for store improvements in neighborhoods that have limited healthy food access. And then from our perspective, the kind of gold standard policy is healthy retailer licensing, which would require all stores to stock a minimum amount of healthy food in order to obtain a food retailer license. Now, as you get into choosing healthy retail strategies, you'll probably face the question of whether you want to use programs or policies. In reality, you'll probably use both, and generally speaking, programs and policies can complement each other in a lot of ways. But it's important to understand the relative advantages of each approach when you're thinking about the retail environment. So the advantages of programs include being able to if you're working in a health department or community-based organization that doesn't have a lot of experience working with corner stores or in food retail in general, it provides an opportunity to spend a lot of time focusing and understanding the retail environment and understanding the challenges of being in that business and of stocking healthier products. It allows you to build relationships with store owners and other businesses and groups that work with store owners. It can also be an opportunity to pilot different types of ideas on a small scale before ramping up to a policy. And then programs are good if your goal is to work with a relatively small number of stores, and it allows you to sort of focus a lot of resources on a small number. Now, policies can require fewer resources in order to get greater reach. So if having a minimum requirement for healthy food stocking for stores would reach into all small stores, whereas a program might require a lot of really intensive work with a handful of stores. And a policy can also establish a norm about what it means to be a food retailer, and sort of change what the community thinks about these types of stores, so that they come to expect. Sorry, I haven't had enough coffee this morning. They can come to expect healthier products in these stores rather than the typical junk food and tobacco and alcohol.
Hey, Christine, it's Ria.
Yeah. Oh, hello.
Hey. I think it would be a really good time to do a poll right now.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Okay, so I think it would be great to get a sense of who's in the room or in our chat room and where everyone is on the spectrum that Christine just went through. So in just a minute, I'll flip to the poll screen. You folks will answer the question, where are you now? And your options are going to be the 5 boxes on the left of your screen right now. So learning about retail strategies, are you working with 1 or 2 stores? Are you operating a healthy food retailer program? Maybe you're developing an incentive policy, or are some of you actually implementing retailer licensing? All right, so here we go. I'll give you about a minute to answer this question, and for those of you who are very speedy, I'm going to entertain you with some fun facts. I was recently reading a magazine called Convenience Store News, and according to them, convenience store owners experienced an increased amount of competition from retailers like drug and dollar stores in 2013. And I thought this was really interesting, and I wanted to share it here because it has implications for which types of small stores we target when we're doing interventions. So when we talk about corner store work, a lot of people think about small stores, convenience stores, but this data is saying that we should start paying attention to dollar stores and drug stores as well. Okay, so it looks like most people have answered. I'm going to close the poll. Great. So we can see that about 1/3 of you are just thinking about a healthy food retail program. Another 1/3 are designing and implementing a program, and actually a good number of you are thinking about policy, and a small number are actually implementing policy, so that's interesting. So Christine, now that we know where people are, do you have suggestions for where they can go?
Yes, definitely. So I also noted in the chat box that someone said that it was hard to pick just one because they're looking at all of those options, which is a great segue into my next couple of points about starting to work on a plan for improving the retail environment. So for those of you who are going to join us for the whole webinar series, we want to provide you with some homework to think about before our next webinars. And hopefully this won't be a deterrent for you to come to the future webinars in case we might assign more homework. We'll try to keep it easy. So as we noted earlier, it's important to think about your retail work within the larger community food system context. And even though a lot of you have indicated that you are already embarking on your retail work, you're not just in the thinking stages, it's not too late to do some of this work. Or if you've already done some of this planning, it might be a good opportunity to revisit it and see what's changed since you've started your retail initiatives. So before the next webinar, if you have some time, you might sit down by yourself or with your team and start thinking about your retail and overall food system goals. So here are some potential guiding questions. And each of these, potentially could be a whole graduate dissertation of data gathering and analysis. And I would encourage you to, there will likely be some data gathering that you need to do, but also, think about what existing data sources you might have access to, either within the health department or community-based organizations or a food policy council, or even if a local college or university maybe has already sent some students out to look at some of these things. So you might think about what the current retail environment looks like, and has there been any surveying done? Like here in California, we just the state health department just led this big initiative to gather a bunch of data about what's being sold and marketed in small stores across the state. So there might be data sets available like that. Definitely be thinking about what the needs of the community are. Have there been surveys within the neighborhoods you might be focusing on about what types of food access people want? It's also important to understand who is already working on food systems, what other organizations, what other agencies. You might, if there's a food policy council and you're not already engaged with that, that might be a good place to find some of those other actors in this field. And then think about the mix of strategies you'll need to serve the community's food access needs. And it might not be entirely focusing on food retail. There might be other elements to that. The pathway that we presented earlier, and it's going to come up again, is a good place to start for some ideas. Our website has a lot of ideas of different food system strategies. And of course, the subsequent webinars in this series will also give you more ideas for your planning. Now, in reality, your path to healthy food retail won't be as linear as we've presented it. You'll probably skip steps, go forward, backwards, maybe even get turned around a little bit, and that's okay and completely normal. But it's important to really have a guiding plan and to know what your end result should look like, and really a community-based vision. And you'll eventually get there. It can also be a really good idea in terms of looking ahead to what you might do a few years from now, because you can use your early work, for example, working with 1 or 2 stores, to pilot and test out different ideas that might eventually become policy a few years down the road.
Awesome. This is Rio again. And on that note, I'd love to do another poll and see where people are. So if we look back to our poll that we took already, where are you now? We saw that most people are thinking about a program or implementing a program. And now it would be great to see where people actually want to go. So here's the question. And let me skip now to the actual poll itself. And again, I'll give you about a minute to answer the question. And like before, I will entertain you with another fun fact. So the state of California did a survey in 2013 of over 7,000 retail stores. And they recently released the data on March 5th. And there's a lot of data, a lot about alcohol and tobacco. I know someone asked about whether this series will incorporate tobacco or just alcohol. And one really interesting data point is that it's easier to get alcohol than it is to get produce or milk in the stores that were surveyed. So about 2/3 of the stores surveyed sell alcohol. Less than half sell fresh produce. And only about 1/3 sell low or non-fat milk. So that's a great data source for folks to check out. Okay, great. It looks like most people have answered the question, so I'm going to close the poll. And okay, fantastic. So over half of the folks actually want to end up with a policy for healthy food retail, which is great. and a good other chunk see implementing a program as their end goal. Great. So Christine, given that information, do you have thoughts on any upcoming webinars that folks would be interested in?
Why, I do, of course.
It's almost like we planned it.
So I did see someone ask about incorporating tobacco or alcohol observations into the series, and we're still planning it, and I think open to incorporating. Particularly, we have a lot of experts on staff on the tobacco side, so we'll talk to them and see where we might be able to fit them into our existing plan, since it sounds like people are interested in that. So it looks like the 50% or so of people on this webinar are really interested in eventually getting to retail policy work. And so that webinar is way off in November, so mark your calendars right before Thanksgiving. But I will say, and we'll talk about this in a couple minutes, that you of course don't have to wait until November to get in touch with us if you want to talk about those ideas sooner. But the idea of the series is to sort of build up to that point and mirror the path that many communities will take. So for those of you who are just getting started, and I saw probably the second most number of people were interested in implementing a program, definitely attend the April 22nd webinar. So that is going to look at how to design a healthy food retail certification program to make it as strong as possible from a public health standpoint. Those of you who are, again, implementing a program or getting ready to implement one, or who are already working on a program, you might be particularly interested in the May and the October webinars. The May one is about looking for particularly federal funding, and we've identified some sources of funding that maybe not everybody in the public health community is aware of or knows could be potentially used to fund healthy retail. So check that one out. And then the October one focuses on produce distribution, which seems to be the sort of #1 challenge that we hear about, and we'll focus on some different ways to get fresh produce into stores. If you're working in a rural area, a lot of the strategies throughout the series will be applicable, but we wanted to provide a webinar especially for you since we hear from the field that rural communities want more tailored resources. So the September webinar will focus exclusively on rural communities. And then, like I said, if you're interested in policy, November 18th is your day, and we'll talk about a range of options for healthy food retail, including licensing. So, as I said, this webinar series is drawn out throughout the year, and you might need help with some of these things sooner than we'll get to an actual webinar about a particular strategy. So here are some different ways to get help in the meantime. So first off, we have tons of resources on our website for those of you who are working on healthy food retail programs. Health on the Shelf is our very comprehensive guide to designing a healthy food retailer certification program, and you can download that from our website. Green for Greens focuses on finding funding for healthy food retail. And then Incentives for Change and providing fresh produce in small food stores are our latest products. And the incentives one, as it sounds, is about identifying potential incentives for small food retailers to make changes. And then the fourth one, about fresh produce, starts to unpack a typical produce distribution system and how to navigate it in order to get produce into the small store environment. If you're interested on the policy side, we also have a lot of resources. Licensing for Lettuce is our guide to healthy food retailer licensing policies. The Sugar Sweetened Beverage Playbook has several strategies in it that could be implemented in the retail environment to limit access to sugary drinks. And then the calculating selling area one is also new, and it is kind of an implementation piece for the licensing policy. So part of the licensing policy looks at the percentage of retail space or selling area that's devoted to healthy food. And so this guide provides ideas for how to calculate that. We are also available for technical assistance, and Rio is your initial point of contact for that. We field all sorts of questions every week, from how to get started to I really need an example of this particular type of incentive, to is this idea that I have, is this legal? So definitely feel free to get in touch, and Rio will either answer your question or she'll get it to the right person in the organization to help you out. I also want to note the Healthy Food Access Portal, which is from PolicyLink, the Food Trust, and the Reinvestment Fund. It has a lot of retail strategies on it, but also broader food system strategies in a nice-to-navigate form. So definitely check this out as well if you're interested in different stories about healthy food retail initiatives.
All right. And now that Christine's highlighted some of our resources and the ways that we can help you, we'd love to hear from you about the resources that you need to further your healthy retail work. And just as a note, I am seeing questions in the chat box about whether our webinar series will include pop-up retail or farmers markets. Please do note that in this poll, because as Christine said, we are still developing our series and would love to tailor it as much as possible to folks who are going to be listening. So here we go. This is an open text field. And again, I'll give you about a minute to type in your answers. Just note that you do have to you have to hit submit for us to actually see your answers. And as I've been doing, I will give you more fun facts. So going back to the California survey data, one really interesting finding was that stores near schools are more likely to display tobacco products near candy compared to the statewide average. And I thought that this was a really compelling data point because it highlights a need and opportunity for tobacco and nutrition folks to work together, which, as Christine mentioned, is something that we try and do at ChangeLab Solutions. So it's really interesting to see that kind of data. And then going back to the convenience store news magazine, it said that retailers anticipate that in 2014 there will be more regulation of energy drinks, foods with trans fats and sugars, and e-cigarettes. And I'm flagging this because most of you are interested in doing more policy work, and as policy advocates gain more traction with regulation, it's just good to be aware of what other stakeholders are doing and how they're talking about the issue. So just really interesting to know that convenience store retailers are expecting more regulation. Okay, so please do finish up whatever you're writing and hit submit. I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1, and closing. Great. So now let's move on to questions. I've answered a few throughout the webinar, but I also wanted to pick up a few. So Christine, Joelle asks, have there been any successful programs working with dollar stores or other corporate retailers? Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you heard anything?
I do hear about different examples of that. I know there's a program up in Oregon that has had some success working with a local chain convenience store or gas station, I think, chain there. And then I believe some folks in Ohio have also worked with more of the chain convenience stores. Again, I think a local chain. There's some work that's happening in Arkansas. There's a researcher at University of Arkansas who is really interested in the dollar store environment. In southern states in particular, dollar stores are really becoming a major food supplier. So feel free to connect offline, and we can put you in touch.
Great. It is 11:30, and we are sticklers for being on time. Should we answer a couple more questions, or?
Why don't we can just wrap up, and I will just say that a couple of final thoughts. One is the remainder of the series will be hour-long webinars that will include a bit more in-depth content than today's webinar did, and we're working to get usually probably at least one and ideally probably 2 guest speakers from the field for each of the webinars. So the format will be a little bit different than today's webinar, but really packed with a lot of great content. Like we said, please feel free to be in touch in the meantime and let us know what questions and what needs you have. We'll try to point you to resources that we are aware of, or if we don't have the answer, to another group that might be able to help. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you on our future webinars.